Hello, everyone. On behalf of everyone at NatGLC, thank you for joining this producer-focused conversation today over a very hot topic, New World Screwworm. Before we get started, a few quick notes. We are recording today's conversation. The recording will be sent out to all those who registered and posted on NatGLC's YouTube channel. Please use the chat for any questions or comments throughout the webinar. And if you have any audio or video issues, try leaving and rejoining, or you can check your device settings under the Teams menu. Our host today is Linda Pechin-Long, and Linda, I'm going to pass it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Haley, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We are having a little bit of a technical difficulty admitting two of our speakers, but hopefully we can get them on board here in just a moment. My name is Linda Pechin-Long, and I am one of 3 Legacy Landscapes Program Directors for NatGLC. So today we are joined by an outstanding panel of 3 people who bring different perspective to this conversation. Dr. Sam Williams, he's a practicing veterinarian who gives level-headed advice to producers on how to navigate this challenge. Dr. Alfonso Ortega, also known as Pancho Ortega, he is a legacy landscape producer and rancher from Texas, where New World Screwworm is already a reality that he is in the midst of. Dr. Manny Encinas, another legacy landscape producer and rancher from New Mexico, who is preparing before it becomes a larger issue closer to home. As we know, New Mexico has also recorded its first cases of New World Screwworm. Gentlemen, I hope all 3 of you are on here, and I appreciate you being here and sharing your experiences. I would also like to thank everyone joining us online. What a great large group that we have on. This is going to be really, really fun. Whether you are from an area already affected or simply wondering what this could mean for your operation, I hope that you leave here today better informed. I also want to be clear about why NatGLC is hosting this conversation. This webinar is about resilience, not fear or speculation. As land stewards, we dedicate significant time to resilience, healthy soils, healthy grasslands, healthy livestock, and healthy businesses. The New World Screwworm presents another challenge that underscores the importance of resilient systems. So instead of simply reacting when a problem occurs, we aim to be and give you tools to be proactive and well-informed. We want to address the following questions. What actions can we take now? Which management practices can enhance the resilience of our operation? What should producers be monitoring? And how can we better prepare ourselves before a response is even needed? So our goal today is to share practical, science-based information alongside real-world experiences from producers who are actively addressing these challenges every single day. So I also want to let you know that this will be a conversation. We'll alternate between the panelists to compare perspectives and leave ample time at the end for questions. But as we move along, please feel free to post your questions in the chat. With that, let's get started. Do I have all 3 panelists on, Haley? Yes. Okay.
Yes, you do.
What would a webinar be if everything went smoothly from the get-go, right? I mean, come on. So let me start with Dr. Sam. What are some early signs that producers should never ignore, and what warrants an immediate call to your veterinarian?
So much like any disease process, these cattle that are going to be affected by the New World Screwworm, they're going to act ill, for one. They may be away from the herd. They may they may congregate towards water, much like cattle that you see that maybe have respiratory disease. Something's gonna be off about them. The obvious thing with New World Screwworm is certainly gonna be an infected open wound. So that's a sign that we've got a wound. We're gonna see potentially maggots in these wounds, and that's going to be when you need to call. We need to call for help because we've got to identify. Just because we see maggots does not mean that it's going to be a New World Screwworm, but everybody's ears are perked up right now. So we see a wound like that, then we need to do some things to help facilitate and determine if these are, or if this is going to be a problem or not. So number one thing, call your veterinarian. You should have a good standing relationship with your veterinarian, and that should be step one. Step two would be also, we have the Texas Health Commission is going to be very integral in helping working together to identify these animals, collect samples, get these samples off to the authorities. The problem with these maggots is that that's going to be the source of what the fly is going to turn into. So, there's a question: do we move the animals to a place where we can deal with them? Do we try to deal with them in place? Well, I mean, it's a cow. It's not like a horse where we can go put a halter on them, treat a wound, maybe sedate them. These animals are going to have to be potentially moved to an area where we can deal with the wound, whether they have to be restrained somehow. So being careful though, once they're to a place where we've got them restrained, collecting samples, the appropriate maggots, putting them in the appropriate solution so we can get that submitted, but also treating the area, treating the wound. We've got an open wound, we've got an infection. We've got a source of the vector of the screwworm fly. So as we're treating the wound and these maggots are dropping off, we have to be conscious of them entering into the ground. We have to make sure that they're disposed of, killed properly. We don't want to leave them alive on the ground because that could hatch into another fly that can, start the life cycle over again. Once we've disposed of all that, now we've got an open wound, treating them with a topical for antibacterial as well as a screwworm type protection. There are sprays that are available that will help with that. There are some other creams and powders that will be available to us as well. So that's going to be important. So, identifying these animals from a health standpoint, that's going to be critical. The other thing too is we don't need to be afraid. There's going to be, the screwworms are already here, right? So identifying the screwworms is going to be critical. I've heard clients, I've heard people that have talked to other people that if they think they have screwworms, they're not going to report it, and that is the absolute wrong thing to do. We have to be able to identify the screwworm maggots, because if we don't identify them, how are we going to know that they're in our area? How are we going to be able to help you guys? Once we've identified that you have screwworms, probably one of the first steps is you get the sterile flies in and around your place and in the area. And that is the absolute most critical thing that's got to happen to be able to help eradicate this. So, there shouldn't be a fear with this. I think a lot of that fear is going to be subsided by you having a plan going forward. What is your plan today? What is your plan going to be whenever we have screwworms? And that's where your relationship with your veterinarian is going to be extremely critical, because I can guarantee that all the vets that deal with cattle and other farm animal species, as well as, equine, we've been thinking about this for a while, and we all have some ideas on how this needs to be treated. So just kind of in a nutshell, as far as identifying animals and what to do afterwards, that's the course of action right there.
Thank you. great information. And I love that you said, don't be afraid, but be proactive, have a relationship with your veterinarian, have a community, and just be prepared. So my next question is to Pancho. Knowing you are a rancher in Texas, and I know that you shared in a conversation that we had that you were afraid initially, but now you have backed off a little bit from that fear as you've learned a little bit more about the screwworm and you've had some conversations. But dealing with the reality that you are dealing with, are you preparing? Are you checking your animals? Are you doing things differently now than you were a year ago?
Well, let me comment first on my initial thoughts. A year ago, when we learned about the screwworms in Mexico, uh, you know, I I really panicked. I had a conversation with my partner, my son, said, well, the first case in the United States, I mean, in Texas, we have to liquidate everything. And the reason for my panic is that I remember very vividly living the problem in the 70s in Mexico. I mean, at the ranch with my grandpa, it was six of us on horseback every day, roping cattle from 6 a.m. in the morning all the way to sundown. And, every single calf that would not attend when it was born, it will die. I mean, there was no way to save it. We carried a small mechanism, would rope it, tie it to a tree, and then doctor it there, come back every day to check the belly button and until it was completely dry. Then we would release it. But even with that, we had adult animals with worms, and all the way from the ears. We don't have the hematophagus bats here in the States, thanks God. But over there, we'll have the bats and the flies will deposit the eggs right there, and that was enough, to get usually the worms on the neck of the animals or the ears. So as a result, we had animals with no that their ears were so damaged that it was the only way was to cut the ear and then doctor the wound. So although after I learned, well, number one, the screw-on flies do not come as a biblical plague. We started getting cases, one case first. Now I think we are at 30, but it's not spreading as fast as we thought it would. And I have read some of the epidemiological, entomological information, and for every detected case, they predict that there might be 200 cases that are not detected. That is very important information, because even if we have 30 cases in Texas, that might mean that we might have, if every flight goes all the way completing their cycle, they might have 600,000 flies active in the whole area. But what we learn is that they are dropping 4 million flies per week. That gave me confidence, because if they are doing that, that is why it's spreading it low. So that the problem is being taken care pretty good so far.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so with that said, if we can hold it like this between now and November, considering that the plant in Mexico is already producing flies, and it might be producing 100 million per week by December. In December, we would have the winter, and the activity of the flies is going to decline. And that might be our opportunity to push it back to Mexico.
Yes, and that goes.
Yes.
So,
Now, about your question about what I have changed nothing, to tell you the truth. We manage 7 ranches, and I go once, at the most twice a week. But I have always checked the water holes, things like that. As Dr. Williams said, with enough time on this business, you can guess when an animal is having problems. So we are paying close attention to that. Locally for us, in all our cow-calf operations, we have breeding seasons in the spring. So our calves are born at the beginning of the winter, which is when we have the less activity of the flies. That is going to help us to protect the newborn calves, because the activity is going to be lower on the flies. That is one thing. One thing that we did change this year already is that we didn't do the surgical castration. We use the rubber bands to castrate, to avoid. Yes, there is a chance that there might be a point in there where the flies might get, but it's less dramatic than just using your knife and producing a lot of blood. That is something that we have changed.
So changing your calving season to a time of year that the flies are not as active, and using a different method for castrations are a couple things that producers can consider to build resilience in their own operations, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And my next question is going to be to Manny. Manny, this is still a distance away from your operation, about 200 miles or so. Is there any preparations that you are making now in your operations, and are there things that are being done in your community to be better prepared for when this comes to your area?
Thank you for that question, Linda. And I'll tell you, very similar to Pancho, but very concise. Is a year ago, when this was rapidly approaching the United States, I was very anxious. Didn't feel like it quite knew enough. Hadn't been through the experiences that Pancho had been through, but today I have a lot more peace of mind in dealing with this. I feel like technology is a lot further along. But as far as our preparations going forward, it's really just building our own biosecurity plan. We've been through these exercises with other types of animal disease outbreaks. I can recall, 10, 15 years ago when persistent infections of BVD were prevalent. They're really doing a lot more testing, and we kind of had biosecurity plans, and we're kind of doing the same thing with this situation, knowing that it's on the horizon but not here yet. Again, it's kind of an inside outward kind of approach, starting with our cows, calves, and yearlings on grass, and also managing our lots. And it's very simple, just fly protection, moving our feeding and supplementation locations, checking cattle as often as possible. Obviously, we're dry, so we're seeing cattle a lot more frequently right now in New Mexico than we typically would. But knowing a little bit more about just what these adult flies live off of and how they migrate and how they move, that's kind of eased my mind a little bit too. But it's also going back to, again, we're still dry, sourcing a lot of our hay locally or from the north, not bringing so much hay in from the south. I think that's, for me, one thing that's on our biosecurity plan, is making sure it's coming in out of Colorado or further north for right now. And it's communicating and educating our crew, talking to our neighbors. I mean, most of our neighbors here are cow-calf operations, but I know my dad runs up against operations that have seasonal yearlings, and just kind of just sharing the best available information that we have with our neighbors and our own crew. And I think that's key. That kind of builds a little bit of a defense mechanism around us. And then, as Dr. Williams said, just discussing a treatment plan with our vet is very important. We're blessed that we have a really good, solid vet that we work with on a regular basis, and then understanding the state response in New Mexico. And I think learning a lot from what Texas is doing, what the producers on the ground are responding to, and how the agencies themselves are responding to the outbreaks is very important. For us also, Linda, we have a lot of visitors come by our place. It's kind of a year-round deal, and we're really just trying to vet those that are coming before they arrive. Little to did we know that a lot of Canadians this last winter summered in Mexico, or wintered in Mexico, excuse me. They wintered in Mexico, and you know that that began our vetting process, is understanding a little bit more where our visitors are coming from, and kind of wrapping it up here, just common sense approaches, doing more regular trailer washouts, dousing our trailers with permethrin. And there's those places where cross-contamination can occur if we're running to sale barns or running into town. But we're just trying to, kind of focus on those types of measures. Looking into next season, we're a delayed castration operation, so we typically castrate in the wintertime. So, we're thinking that fly populations will be down, but, kind of next year into the, early spring, starting our fly control a little bit, our feed through specifically approaches a little bit sooner is going to be some of the stuff that we're looking at, but no big changes in our calving season. But it's just, again, just communication and staying calm and exercising the best vigilance plan that we can, with starting with our cows and looking outward.
Thank you, Manny. That's some excellent information that I think a lot of producers on this call can take note of and maybe implement in their own operations. So I'm going to go back to Dr. Williams. Would you please, well, first of all, I would like for you to maybe back to Pancho's talking about what happens last time we had the screwworms. What do we have now that we didn't have? I feel like we are better equipped to fight the screwworm than we were the last go around. So could you talk a little bit about that, and then maybe also talk about what are some biosecurity practices that producers can have in place to build resilience in their operations?
Yeah, absolutely. So you are correct. 50, 60 years ago, when this had hit U.S. soil and they were having to deal with it, this is kind of before my time, but we didn't have a lot of the products that we do have now. We have a couple of tools in the toolbox, and some of them are pretty sharp. So that's really, really nice thing to have. Ivermectin was not available. All these avermectins were not available. We did have permethrins and things like that back then that we're using as salves and things like that to treat the wounds. But now we have actual drugs that will get systemic and get into the bloodstream, so that when these screwworm larvae start to feed on tissue, they will die because the concentrations are there. So some of those products are available as injectables that we have. Like I was mentioning, the avermectins. There is a new class of drugs new to cattle in the U.S. have just been approved. It is a topical pour-on product, okay, and it is the same drug that some of us may have used in our cats and dogs for fleas and ticks and other external parasites. That product is called Bravecto, the trade name of it, but the chemical name is Fluoroliner on the cattle side. So that's a new product that they've actually been using it in South America over the past 5 or 6 years and have had really, really good results with it. It's very encouraging now that we have it approved for use only for screwworms larvae, as well as the fever ticks, which we also have here in Texas. These are exciting new products that we have that we'll be able to use once we need to use them. They're being used currently in some of the endemic, or the quarantined areas. So we're still kind of early in the process, right? Like, it's only been here in the U.S. For about a month. So I don't know if there's any data available as to how effective some of these treatment programs have been, from trying to eliminate it from the actual herd and the individual animal. But just if you can extrapolate that from some of the data of use in South America, and even in Australia, it's been used in Australia for external parasites for over 10 years. The data looks good. So a lot of these products are going to only be available through use from your veterinarian, like it's going to be a prescription product. So with that being said, that's as Manny has said, that having that relationship with your veterinarian, we call it a VCPR, which basically stands for veterinary client patient relationship. That is going to be critical. So if you don't have one of those currently that's active, I suggest that you contact your local veterinarian and let's get that thing started and at least, kind of keep that thing fresh, because it's going to be critical. What are some things that, and again, there are some other products. There is a list of approved products by the USDA that we can use for screwworms. So I think that we are going to. I think there was some discussion about maybe having that list more available. It's not easy to find, and to be honest with you, I was in 10 or 15 minutes trying to pull it up before this meeting, and I'll be honest, I had a difficult time finding it. And it's just, hopefully we can have that information for you so that you can see what those products are. As far as just general biosecurity, I think anything and everything that you've always done for fly control, for tick prevention, keep doing it. We need to keep doing that, because that's going to be important, because again, some of those products are going to be effective against screwworms when they come. Now, will things change if you get screwworms in your area and you get quarantined? It might, because at that point you've kind of elevated yourself into a higher risk category. So we need to do some additional preventative / treatment things that are approved for use for, trying to eliminate the New World Screwworm in your animals. So, but prior to that, you're already doing fly control. That's going to be important. What's interesting about this fly, and I'm not an entomologist, but just talking to people, having done some research on my own, it's not a fly that lives on cattle. It lives in the brush. It doesn't feed on blood. It doesn't feed on manure. It actually feeds off of some kind of a plant pollen, and therefore that's why it tends to live in the brush. So you may never ever see an adult fly, screwworm fly, the Homeliocochlea, or the Cochleomya fly. So with that being said, what you do see will be if you're infected, is going to be the actual larval stage or the egg sacs that get laid on the open wounds. So, from a biosecurity kind of / management, and both Pancho and Manny have already alluded to that, maybe trying to do some of the things that create open wounds, and try to do that and shift maybe some management strategies to where those are done in times where maybe the fly population is less. I think that's going to be an important thing to help try to eliminate, the chance of these things happening. Probably one of the biggest, well, it's not probably the biggest, the biggest thing that the screwworms tend to attack is newborn navels. I think that's where we're going to see most of our devastation is on navels of newborns. So, for the people that are able to treat an open wound, or maybe as a calf is being born, within the first 24 to 48 hours, being able to put your hands on that calf and do some things to that navel, such as disinfecting with a topical solution of iodine and or chlorhexidine to clear up any infection that might be wanting to start. Any kind of topical spray or powder or cream to help kind of repel flies from that wound. And then, also possibly a systemic drug like we were talking about that are approved for use in a newborn, to provide them with some protection for several weeks while that navel is healing up. I think that's going to be something else that you certainly need to look forward or look to doing, in the near future. There's some operations where I know that's not going to be an option, but if you're able to do that, I think that's going to help you greatly to be able to to treat those wounds and get them to heal faster to eliminate, the risk of screwworm larvae.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. So, Pancho, Dr. Ortega, are there any, now that you are dealing with this in this current times, are there any supplies or an emergency plan or any different record keepings that you are doing right now to stay resilient?
One thing that I already ordered is my local vet, Dr. Glenn Wilkinson. He told me that there is a spray. The commercial name is Catron. And what this does is that when you put it in the wound with the screw worms, they become really active and they come out by itself from the wound, or most of them, and so it's easier to clean with that. I'm assuming I haven't done it yet, thanks God. But and then his other recommendation is that he said you can make a mix of coral powder with Vaseline, which you can put in the wound, and that will take care of that will deter flies and will help to heal the wound. I have used that mix of coral powder and Vaseline for protecting my horses from ticks. I put them on the ears, and it lasts for 2 weeks. There. So I am prepared with that. I am glad that Dr. Williams mentioned that there are some injectable products that are approved to protect newborn, because I didn't have that. And I would love to know what we can have just to be proactive about this. And if somebody knows how to do it, why don't you give us a list, a step by step, on what to do when we find the first case? Okay, call your vet or report the case. I agree with Dr. Williams. I mean, as soon as we report the case, they are going to cover us in flies, and that might be the only case that we find, which is great, which might be great. But call the case, then have these products available for cleaning wounds, iodine or this or that or that. Then there's these other products that might make easier to clean the wound. Catron, this and that, and then keep treating the wound with this or that, and inject your newborn with this, or if adult animals use this or that, and that would be great if somebody could produce a flyer like that. I consider myself able to find things in the internet and things like that, but I don't have the time to be 1 hour on the computer trying to find out what are the things that are available, and then having to decide between Catron or this or that. We ranchers, and I'm talking for most of my partners around, we need something simple to read. And something that is not going to take 2 or 3 hours jumping from one link to another to find out what to do. That's something that we need. So I hope some of the agencies or even
absolutely, and you
can do something like that.
Yeah. So you're giving me the perfect opportunity to share with everyone that NatGLC, we're actually working on a resource page on our website where we're going to post this information. And so any information that any of you feel would be valuable to have on this, please share that with us. But that is something that we are in the process of creating. So, if you need a step-by-step flyer, we can work on that. But we're definitely we realize, we understand, we have heard that it's hard to find information and that you have to go to multiple places, digging deep. I know Dr. Williams even shared last week that he's sometimes struggling to find the information. So we are working on that resource page, and hopefully we can pull that together in the next few weeks. So thank you for that, Poncho. I want to pose the next question to Manny, and then I see the questions are starting to pop up in the chat. So I'm going to give this one question to Manny, and then we'll answer a few of the questions in the chat. But I know that you spoke on some of the biosecurity practices that you have. I also know that overall herd health is important to you. How does that overall herd health, in your opinion, enhance your resilience towards the screwworms?
Yeah,
Or do that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Linda. And to me, I think it's, herd health is paramount. It's what has always driven performance and driven dollars, for ranchers. And I think in this case specifically, it's key. We know that again, cattle that are healthy recover quicker from stressors, whether they're environmental or they're management-driven stressors. And I feel like that's one of the things that we always try to encourage this time of the year. We really try to focus on trace mineral consumption and parasite control, internal and external. So during the summer, we're looking again, making sure they're eating the mineral 2 to 4 ounces per head per day, depending on your mineral program. Making sure they're up and they're drinking water. The water is a good source of water, and making sure there's no switching tails. Right? I mean, to me, that's a pretty good sign. I think that animals are doing what they need to do. Just those three things are my key indicators as we go check cattle on a regular basis. But yeah, overall herd health, is essential. And like Pancho said, I mean, we go to the waters. I mean, when the cattle should be at waters, and even when they're not supposed to be at waters, kind of just trying to get around to them, making sure that there's no stragglers left behind. That's another key. But yeah, our herd health is essential as far as resilience in a situation where again an animal that even is infected is going to recover probably quicker if they're in a healthy state than one that's being stressed nutritionally again by other parasites or by the lack of essential micronutrition.
Thank you. Excellent information there. So let me look at in the chat. I'm going to start at the first question. The use, and either one of you can answer this, the use of sterile flies was mentioned earlier. Do you have additional information on the use? That is something that we can probably try to get on our website as well.
Yeah. I think it's been mentioned here also as well before, but as far as sterile flies, that's the only eradication tool that we have. That's what eradicated it from the U.S., 50, 60 years ago, and that's what's going to eradicate it this go round. The biggest problem is because we haven't dealt with with screwworms in the U.S. in such a long period of time, the facilities and the production of it is not where it needs to be to deal with the current situation. So I know that all the flies that are being produced in Panama, which is about 100 million per week, are coming to the U.S. The new facility, the Matapa facility, was a fruit fly facility. I think they're producing about 10 million per week right now, with the projections are to have 100 million by the end of the year as far as ramping up production. One thing that's pretty interesting too is the money that was allocated for the new facility that's going to be in South Texas. Initially, that facility was supposed to come online at the end of next year. So let's say fall of 27. Because of some changes and how that's being managed, now they're looking at having flies that are actually being produced in March of 27. So, we're bumping that up by a full 6 to 8 months. And I think that timing is super critical, because think about when our fly population really starts to ramp up. It's in March. So if, in the springtime. So if we can have that facility online, that once it's at full production, we're looking at an additional 300 million flies per week. That's going to be extremely helpful in trying to get in front of the screwworms. So everybody talks about sterile flies, but maybe you don't know exactly how that works. So just real quickly, what they're doing is they're irradiating these flies to where they're sterilized, right? So being that they're sterile, they still mate once they're turned out into the wild. They're going to mate with the wild type females, the sterilized males. Once the eggs are laid, the eggs are not fertile. They haven't been fertilized, so therefore they never hatch. And that's how we eradicate it. The fly, the female fly only lays eggs once in her life cycle, her lifetime. So once she lays her egg sac, she's done. So that's how the sterile fly technique works and that's why it's so important because we have to figure out a way to treat the flies and the larvae, before that it kind of ever propagates into the animal, and that's it.
Thank you.
Well, let me add something to Dr. Williams' comment. The other important thing is that there is a group of researchers already working on the technique to produce only males. At this point, 50% of the flies released are males and 50% are females. So there is nothing to prevent that a sterile male mate with a sterile fly, which is completely useless. But once this technique is ready, it's going to be only sterile males, and those are going to be searching for the wild flies. That is basically going to improve the effectiveness of the mating of the sterile mates, which might be a big help. In my opinion, this is not going to be a problem that is going to be solved with a single technique. There is a bunch of things that probably going to have to be combined. Like I know that they are using attractants in Mexico and things like that. That might be considered later on to have. There is nothing wrong with have several approaches working at the same time. The sterile flies help us to get rid of the problem back in the 70s, but we have so many other resources at this point.
Thank you. Good points there. Next question. I'm a hog farmer in South Texas on pasture. I'm curious if there's any guidance for us hog people outside of cattle information.
So luckily, one of the products that is available is actually approved for use in pigs and hogs. So that's the Dectomax injectable that we are talking about. It does have a label of 21 days against New World screwworm larvae. So that is something certainly to consider. The thing about these products, though, is that, some of these products, even though they're new for us to have been used, they have been used in South America for several years. So, there is a little bit of concern about potential resistance to screwworm larvae, but, that remains to be seen here in the U.S. So right now we do have a product, and that is that, like I said, the Dectomax, which again is probably a product that you've used before, just as an internal parasitism deworming tool. So that's something I would certainly look at for a treatment and even from a prevention standpoint.
Thank you, and I believe that answered the question. What was the name of that med mentioned? The Dectomax.
Dectomax.
Yes. Then we have someone who would like to know the one to mix with Vaseline for the ears. Was that you, Dr. Ortega?
Yes. So that is the commercial name is Coral powder, and it's a powder that you can use for flies or anything like that. But I don't know the specs. I don't. But I have used that for many years, and it works pretty good on ticks. And you mix that powder like 50-50 with the Vaseline, and it works pretty good. Dr. Williams, do you know what is the chemical compound of coral powder?
Yeah, so Coral is the trade name for an organophosphate called Coumaphos.
Right, yes.
So, that's what they use in the dip tanks, are used to and currently using, for the fever ticks. There is that Coral powder, the one that's on the list for approved use is called Negasont powder. And in trying to find that, actually, I've had some difficulty because it sounds like that one right now is in the hands of Texas Animal Health Commission and USDA for them to disperse out. And that was just some of the information I got. I haven't validated that, so take that for what it's worth. There may be another form of a Coumaphos powder that is available that I'm just not aware of, but the Negasont one that is on the approved list, that's the one that potentially will be able to be mixed with Vaseline or something and used as a topical. It can even be used just as a powder, for instance, like on a navel, or let's say around a castration or dehorn site, for the help with prevention and treatment of the screwworm.
Thank you for that. And then we have someone asking, has there been any research done with insecticide resistance in screwworm? And what do we know about the impact of preventative systemic treatment on beneficial insects?
So
good question.
If you're asking if there's been some research done, there has been, but not in the U.S. against particularly screwworms. Like all the research data is essentially coming out of South America. So there, and I'll be honest, I mean, there's some resistance that's starting to show. So that's why I think it's really important to have that relationship with your veterinarian, and coming up with a plan with them for your situation is key. Because it's not going to be just an injection of this or just spraying with this. It's going to be a multi-phase approach, to be able to treat your cattle. So having that protocol and going forward with, just as solid as a plan as possible is going to be that's not going to be something that we're just going to be able to probably come up with on a one-page flyer. Like everything is going to have to be tailored to the situation. But certainly knowing what the products are, I think that's going to be, incredibly important, because we want to make sure we're using the right products. I know there's a lot of misinformation out there. I've witnessed it myself about using some products that are not approved, and knowing how these products work, there's no way that those things are going to have any effect against screwworm larvae. So, I think that's why this conversation that we're having now, and knowing where to go to get that right information about the approved products is important.
Thank you. Let's see here. So I think what I want to do, we may not know the answer to this question, but was there any justification for cutting screwworm prevention funding? I know as of June, we're now spending 100 times the amount of cut funding just to eradicate the screwworm again. That may not be a question that we can answer here, but does anyone know and have any idea? Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, but it is a valid question for sure. What was the name of the agreement? Go ahead.
Linda, may I comment something? Well, with a problem like this, we as ranchers are going to be all the help that we can get, and if somebody's thinking and supporting us, they could do all kind of things, we have plenty of support programs for so many other things, but this is a special situation, And I would say, well, just any cases that you identify and detect and report. Okay, here we have $15,000, $10,000 for you to cover expenses to increase your surveillance. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, this is an activity that we walk a fine line between making and losing money. So we need all the help. And if we are gonna, if we want to approach this from different points, I mean, right now we have 30 cases. What is the problem with supporting those guys to increase the surveillance? The more better job they do, the more protected the rest of us are gonna be.
Thank you. The last question, before I ask each one of the panelists their final question is, what action can a rancher expect from state and or local officials after a positive report is filed from the rancher and veterinarian?
I think, so obviously we have to identify the screwworm. We've already talked about that. So there's that process. If, let's just say, worst case scenario, it comes back positive. Now you're quarantined. We've got a quarantine zone that's around that property that encompasses your neighbors and, some of the surrounding counties. Then we've got to start, obviously there's a treatment phase. There's a preventative phase, but then what do you do with these cattle once they've been quarantined? There are ways to move these cattle out. Like they can still go to the slaughter. There's processes for that. Potentially for slaughter cattle, we have to be careful about the products that we use and the drug withdrawals, right? So there's going to be strict adherence to that. These cattle that are coming out of the quarantine zones, you can almost guarantee that they're going to be tested to make sure that some of these products are not in the tissues. So the other thing is that these cattle can move as well and go to other places, for sell or for finishing out for whatever purposes. But the process is going to be more than likely, I think it's a treatment of some sort, as well as close inspection with a certificate of veterinary inspection, basically a health certificate, as everybody knows it, of these cattle coming out and going to the outside of the quarantine zone. So, in my mind, that's kind of the process of what's going to happen as far as identifying treatment, and then what do we do with these cattle now once we're in this quarantine zone.
Thank you. And the fact that you can move animals to slaughter, I think, should ease the concern of a lot of producers doing direct to consumer, knowing that, they don't have to potentially bear the financial burden of keeping those animals quarantined over a period of potentially months, right?
Yeah, and we do have to be cautious too, because there are some states that, they are not accepting cattle that are coming out of the quarantine zone. So we have to figure out where these, what our avenues are to be able to move these cattle. So, it's not going to be easy, but this is not going to be quick. This is a disease. This process is going to be years. It's not going to be done at the end of this year. So, and I think that's one thing that people have to realize too, is that, this is going to be an ongoing thing until we can get this pushed out of the US and hopefully, eradicated completely. But that's a big ask. Right now our concern is taking care of the US animals, and then we'll go from there. But it's, I foresee this as being a multi-year deal, and it's the thing is it's here, so we're dealing with it, and that's again, with people that are hopefully for the first time kind of thinking about this, hopefully the panic level is suppressed, because it's here. So we just have to have a plan, and we got to go forward.
Thank you. I see watching the chat, Linda Coffey, thank you, Linda, for being here, and thank you for posting. She posted some a publication that tips for working with a veterinarian that may be helpful to all of you. We can also maybe, I'm speaking for Haley now, but maybe we can send that out as a link in our follow-up email as well. One last question for the panelists, and I want to start with Manny. Manny has been quiet here for a little bit. So if producers, I want you all to answer the same questions. If producers leave today and do one thing this week to make their operations more resilient, what should it be?
You know, for me, it's pretty simple. It's creating your own unique biosecurity plan with your veterinarian and sharing it with your crew and your neighbors and being that leader within your circle of influence to make sure that people have the right and the most up-to-date information possible.
Wonderful. Thank you, Manny. Pancho, same question.
Yes. Yes. You know, the best thing is to be observant and know exactly who you are going to report if you find a case and what are you going to do. Just just be proactive about this, you know, and observation and surveillance, and then just be aware that we have it here. But that is not, and that's something that they could take from this this webinar. But you know, let me just share another piece of information that has been kind of concerning to me. And if more of us are concerned, we might be able to share with other people. But you know, the way that we were able to push the worms all the way to Central America was with the binational commission for the control of the screwworm. You know, that was in place in Mexico with probably 80% funding from the U.S. And that was very effective. My problem is that even if we are producing the flies in Metapa, Chiapas, I'm seriously concerned about the capacity of the Mexican agency to distribute the flies. They have had Senacica get a big budget cut last year and this year. They don't have the resources. So even if they have the flies, how can we be sure that they are going to be able to distribute it? And I have had 2 or 3 examples of places where the worms have been identified, and there are no flies in there. So it's important to share this information with whoever we can. Hopefully, it gets to the right agency, and they might start thinking about reviving the binational commission. It's going to cost a lot of money, but
Thank you.
that is the way we push it last time. You know?
Thank you. And Sam, for you, if again, same question, if the producers leave today and do one thing this week to make their operation more resilient, what should it be?
One thing is hard.
It is.
Mentioned the VCPR, you know, we were talking about reporting suspicious wounds, but to kind of reiterate, just making sure that your overall herd health plan is sound. Okay. So we're talking about nutrition, we're talking about management, we're talking about, you know, vaccinations, making sure that they're current on those things, and, you know, your internal, external parasitism control. All these things, as Manny had mentioned, are very, very important to just overall health, which again is going to be helpful in getting these animals through, you know, these phases where we're having to deal with it. The healthier they are, the faster they're going to be able to overcome disease processes and keep going forward.
Thank you very much. And I know we're right on time, so I'm going to wrap up here very, very quickly. Again, NatGLC, we are planning on this resource page on the website, so stay tuned for that. Follow us on social media, Instagram and Facebook. We will share more information there as well, because I think we all can all agree that we were barely scratching the surface of this conversation today. This conversation could have gone on for hours and hours. But as we wrap up, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Sam, Poncho, and Manny for sharing their knowledge and insights. We truly appreciate your willingness to be part of this conversation. I would also like to thank each of you for taking time out of your day to join us. We know that your time is valuable, and we're truly grateful that you chose to spend this time with us. So, if there's one message that I want you to take away, is that resilience is something that we build over time, but it's also something that we can rely on and strengthen even in challenging moments. The practices that we discussed today, caring for livestock, managing grazing, maintaining strong animal husbandry, and staying connected with veterinarians and fellow producers, are tools that you can use right now to support your operation. So please use those tools. This new world screwworm is a serious threat, but it doesn't have to be met with fear. I think this conversation has shown that to all of you. At least I hope it has. It should, though, absolutely be met with awareness, preparation, and confidence. By staying informed and working together, we can better protect our livestock and livelihood. And with that, on behalf of the National Grazing Lands Coalition, thank you again for joining us today. We hope you leave with a few practical ideas you can put into practice. Take care, stay observant, and continue building resilient operations. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.